Welcome to the 53rd sequel, celebrating the Church of Uganda's history at 150 years of the Church. Where we have reached, we are now after the year 1900. The land has been distributed, but there is one headache on the part of the British government, and that is the fact that the Buganda are yet to recognize the child king. They still recognized Mwanga as much as he was deposed. As far as they were concerned, he was their Kabaka in exile. And one man, the Reverend J.D. Mullins, warned Prime Minister Lord Salisbury Robert Gosgoyne Cecil that as long as Mwanga II was at large, or in detention, meaning that he was still living, he was a danger to the peace of the Buganda kingdom. Why? Owing to the instinctive loyalty of the people to the person of the Kabaka. The Prime Minister of England, Lord Salisbury, resigned, and he was replaced by the Right Honorable Arthur Balfour. But the Secretary of State and for Colonial Affairs, Joseph Chamberlain, was still in office. So he invited Apolo Kaggwa to England, and the cover-up was that Apolo Kaggwa, the great African leader, together with other African leaders, were being invited to Great Britain to attend the coronation of the new King of England. What a cover-up. Chamberlain was not interested in Apolo Kaggwa being at the coronation. He wanted Apolo Kaggwa in London to finalize the elimination of Mwanga II, who had just arrived in the islands of the Seychelles. After 16 months in Jubaland, or Southern Somalia, or British Somalia, or Italian Somalia, Kismayo was the port. The two fugitive kings had been taken to the Seychelles, and now they had lost the chance to eliminate Mwanga at Kismayo simply because it proved a difficult spot to do it. Finally, it had to be done in the Seychelles, and not so long after his arrival there. And so Apolo Kaggwa is invited, and in 1902, he sets to travel to England. The journey began on the 6th of May, 1902. Many people went to see off Apolo Kaggwa, who was not traveling alone. He was taking Ham Mokasa. He was going with the Reverend Ernest Miller, and he was going with a protectorate government officer called H. Prendergast. Now, what is interesting and what you should listen very carefully to is that between Buganda and Mombasa, they needed people to accompany them. And these people who were to accompany them are going to become very interesting for tonight. However, how were they going to travel? The Lere had opened. On the 20th of December 1901, the first locomotive of the Uganda Lere reached Kisumu. It had struggled through the man-eating lions of Savo, the highlands of central Kenya, and the Great Rift Valley, the escarpments of that valley, all the way to Port Florence. The Lere was officially opened in January 1902. It was called the Uganda Lere because it was intended to develop Uganda, and Port Florence was in Uganda then. Therefore, Kaggwa was not going to walk, was not going to use horses or donkeys while in Kenya after the ship taking him to Kisumu. No, he was going to travel by railway. And so these are the people who are to accompany him. I'm bringing this out to show you that here is a person, a great leader in Uganda. He's going to London, but he's being accompanied by some people. The cover-up is he must be accompanied by some people. And who are these? I'm sorry, if you are a family member and a descendant of one of these people, I now have to diverge into what I have discovered in the National Archives of the National Archives of Uganda, and also the newspapers of the time, and what they reported on how he traveled. As a matter of fact, Ham Mukasa even wrote a book. He himself mentions these people accompanying Sir Apolo Kaggwa, not to London, but up to Mombasa, apparently inside a railway, a train. That is what is very unique about this accompanying people. So who are they? The Kaggwa Yakobo Musajja Alumbwa, Techimbugwe Andereya Kiwanuka, and a priest, the Reverend Batulumayo Musoke. Now that is very interesting. Why in the world would a priest of the Native Anglican Church, a priest of the Church Missionary Society, a native priest, accompany Sir Apolo Kaggwa up to Mombasa? For what reason? Maybe to pray inside the train. Okay, maybe. So they used the Entebbe port for departure. But there was some official farewell to do. They went to see the Special Commissioner for the Protectorate at the Government House in Entebbe, and his name was Lieutenant Colonel James Sadler Esodia. The governor and Sir Apolo Kaggwa then went to visit a gentleman called Bolts. Bolts was working at the government printer's premises in Entebbe. He was able to show them a wonderful new printing press. This was before Apolo Kaggwa boarded the steamer, and the steamer took off. It stopped, according to Ham Mukasa, at the islands of Buganda on Lake Victoria. However, they continued on the journey and reached safely at Kisumu. Kisumu, or what you call Kavirondo County, was in Uganda Protectorate. And therefore, that particular area was under Lake Victoria Islands, under the command of Gabunga, therefore under Buganda at that time. And the chief in the area was called Apolo Kaggwa. He was the chief of Kavirondo, which took care of Port Florence as well, in as far as the Buganda system or the native system of leadership was concerned. Now, this is very important to understand that Port Florence, the person whose jurisdiction was recognized was the king of the sea, and that was Buganda. So the king of the sea was the native leader of Kavirondo in 1902, in the month of May, when Sir Apolo Kaggwa arrived at the port, and he was met by the chief appointed by Buganda Kingdom, Apolo Kaggwa. Poor man was overwhelmed by the natives of Kavirondo, who came from near and far, and some even came by boats. To do what? For a demonstration, not to receive Apolo Kaggwa, not to show gratitude to Apolo Kaggwa, but for a demonstration against Apolo Kaggwa, who was in transit. The people were so many. Kaggwa was so embarrassed. He had got no intelligence about this. How the people got to know that Apolo Kaggwa was coming or was going to pass through was also very disturbing. And what did the people do? As they demonstrated, they were chanting, Mwanga tu, Mwanga tu, Mwanga tu, Mwanga tu, Mwanga tu, Mwanga tu. And some were actually speaking in very fluent Luganda. And they were asking, if you tried Mwanga tu, then try us as well. If you are torturing Mwanga too, then torture us as well. And these words were directed to Apolo Kaggwa. If Mwanga too was guilty, free him and jail us in his place. Oh my God, what love by the people of Kavirondo. They are now behaving in a biblical way. Don't jail Mwanga. Yes, we know Mwanga is guilty, but please put us in jail on his behalf and free him. The people of Kavirondo demonstrating as Apolo Kaggwa passed through. The chief, Apolo Kaggwa, cannot understand this. And actually, as far as Apolo Kaggwa is concerned, maybe Kaggwa is part of this as well. The majority of the people singing Mwanga too, Mwanga too, Mwanga too, Mwanga too, not in Buganda, but in Kisumu, Port Florence. The majority of the demonstrators were women. And we are not violent, as Apolo Kaggwa and his team quickly headed for the railway station on 3 donkeys driven by carriages with their properties, guarded by the Uganda rifle officers running alongside them to ensure their security. The border changed later in 1902 from Kavirondo, and that we lost the whole of that Kavirondo to Kenya. But that was later in 1902. By the time Apolo Kaggwa passed there, it was part of the Uganda Protectorate. These disturbances at Kisumu were dismissed by Apolo Kaggwa. According to him, this was a non-issue. It was not anything to be worthy of noticing or even writing about. As a matter of fact, the Reverend Ernest Miller never wrote about these demonstrations. As a matter of fact, Mokasa, in his book, Sir Apolo Kaggwa Discovers Great Britain, simply writes about it in a very funny way. You cannot hardly know that there was a demonstration here. And so, Apolo Kaggwa boarded the train. The people who were visiting, accompanying him, boarded the train, and they left Kisumu very quickly, reaching Nairobi on the 11th of May, 1902. Apolo Kaggwa was still in shock by the events in Kisumu of Port Florence. That Uganda levy had cost Great Britain something like 8 million sterling pounds. In comparison to the original quantity surveyor estimate of only 2 million sterling pounds. Of that time, if even sterling pounds of this time, that's a lot of money. Now imagine in 1902, Apolo Kaggwa and his party enjoyed the train. Those of you who have ever been on that train, now don't think about the European tubes. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the East African train. Those of you who are big enough and ever traveled in it, I have ever traveled in the Uganda East African railway in the 1970s. I'm big enough. I've enjoyed the train from Kampala to Nairobi. So it all the way to Nairobi. That's how it sounded. Now they reached Nairobi very late in the evening, 6:30 p.m. And the next train was leaving in just an hour's time for Mombasa. So they didn't stay in Mombasa at all. They reached Mombasa on the 14th of May, 1902. You realize these are days. So the train would spend the days and days on the way. Yeah. Now the traveling party in Mombasa was there for some time, arranging with the storekeeper of the Church Missionary Society. His name was Bailey, and he was to get tickets for the Kago, Yakobo Msajja Arumbwa, for Chimbugwe, Andere Achiwanuka, and for Reverend Batulumayo Msoke. These three, as much as they had accompanied Apolo Kaggwa, according to Ham Mukasa in his official book, the records of the National Archives show that they were going on further. They were now getting tickets. Where are they going? To Zanzibar. As a matter of fact, Bartolomeo Msokezimbe had ever been to Zanzibar many years ago when he was still a boy. But that was very long ago. He couldn't remember much of what Zanzibar had become. And so, in tomorrow's sequel, we are going to find out what this group were going to do in Zanzibar, as much as we shall also find out how they separated. And Apolo Kaggwa went his way, and they also went their way. It's a very big interest to the church history, because the priest of the native Anglican church is involved in this journey. What is he up to? Is he praying for the travelers? What is he up to? May the good Lord bless us all. Amen.